With joyous hearts and deep reverence, we have the honor of inviting Dr. Uday Kiran, the distinguished head of the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at the hallowed Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. As we open our minds to his words, may we also open our hearts to the sacred truth that every soul is endowed with unique gifts, and that true education lies in recognizing, nurturing, and celebrating those divine strengths. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome and hear it for Dr. Uday Kiran. He will engage and inspire us over next 25 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Mukam karoti vacharam, pangum langayate girim. I offer my humble salutations at the lotus feet of the one who can make even a dumb person speak eloquently, a lame person cross mountains. He's the one who rewires and repairs things. I am truly honored to be here. My humble salutation to all the experts, teachers, policymakers, and all the dignitaries. It's truly a humbling experience because I'm not so much into neuroscience. I'm more of into mathematics and computer science. In fact, when Professor Jean Zer ma'am was telling yesterday that imagine the dendrites growing. So I closed my eyes and imagined the dendrites growing, and as I think, and I had a little wish, how I wish the dendrite becomes a hair. then I realized there are things which don't grow. Of course, brain is not like that. Brain definitely grows, and that's the hope with which we are building today. And I should say upfront that my talk is on two parts. Initially, I will give some background. Of course, I will touch upon certain computational or artificial intelligence aspects, which I'm sure some of the audience will connect because there is a lot of growing concern about the kind of AI development happening, and I will try to connect it with the neuro kind of problems. Then the second part, which again I'll briefly touch upon, with the help of our volunteers, Sanjay brother and Meera ma'am, we are developing certain apps keeping the universal design principles in mind. Some of the apps are being developed at the Department of Mathematics. So the topic of my presentation is strength-based learning for neurodiverse students in the classroom. Of course, none of these terms need to be reinforced. Of course, in Lakshmi ma'am's presentation also, she had covered strength-based learning, focus on the strengths. But I would like to actually mention, I was talking to a participant yesterday, almost at the fag end of the day, and he seemingly remarked, which actually struck on, he said, see, as such, some of these neurodivergent things, autism, spectrum, all this is happening only in abroad. It's mostly American. It's not really happening in India. As teachers, we really don't see that in our classes, but we have to become more open to reality with the use of cell phones and kind of technology that is developing, as ma'am also has just warned, that it can also have a negative effect. The neuroplasticity, as much as it is wielded to constructive, it can also become destructive. So with the technology, we never know what is 5 years hence. So with that note, let me go to the first slide. So let me ask you a question. What is common to all these people? Of course, they are not really people. They have made it really big. Greatest scientists, authors, entrepreneurs. What is common to all of them? Okay, so I think many of you are already educated now. One of the things which is common is they all had difficulty in schooling. Okay, so next time when you see a child in your class Okay, not necessarily in the so-called labeled autistic spectrum or neurodiverse region, but if a child is having some difficulty, you have to imagine the child may be featuring here in the future. And would you be part of that child's life? That should be the question we should be asking. Okay, let me come to my first question. So, brain, of course, as we know, so the way we see brain is it's just one entity, but inside the brain, actually a whole orchestra happening there. Brain is conducting, so thoughts go here, emotions go here. So the question we want to ask is, what is the key design feature of brain, our brains? It is to think or not to think? So any answers? Of course, many of us would get tempted to say think, but actually the answer is it is designed not to think. So we should not be really beating ourselves up when we use ChatGPT because we don't really want to think while typing the letter. Or in a conversation, if you have missed out something, we should not be going back and saying, hey, why didn't I say this? We could have said this, I could have said this. As such, the brain is designed not to think. So if the brain is designed not to think, imagine a classroom in which you have so many minds where we say, all of them we want to blossom, but actually their brain is designed not to think. Now, how do we use this cognitive research, research in cognition theories to actually enable our children to come forward and start thinking consciously? So there is something in the background that when we say thinking, we are too biased towards actually conscious reasoning. So when we say think, actually what we are meaning is conscious, deliberate reasoning. It's not the other aspect of cognition. So I'm really sorry. Can you just quickly forward this? It's not going fast. Yeah, so when we say reasoning, what we mean is the deliberate thinking we do. It is the system 2 in the Daniel Kahneman's language, the great Nobel laureate. It's slow and effortful, it's sequential, logical, mainly used for solving math problems. That's the reason why many students are afraid of us. And they are also used for evaluating arguments. So can you just come? Yeah. So AI is very good at it. So that's the reason why almost 3 decades back, artificial intelligence bet Kasparov in chess. So we should not be looking at that. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Actual part of our thinking is the cognitive part, which we take for granted. Can you just go? So it's actually embodied when we actually are not only mind, but we are also the body. And brain connects the mind and body in a very effective manner. So it's the system 1, and it's very automatic. We really don't, I'll give you some illustrations for that. And so I'm actually having hard time. This is not. So or maybe I don't know. Or this is a touch screen. Thank you. Yeah, I got it. So basically, when somebody is talking, the gestures we see, this is all cognitive. So brain actually decides that there are important things. Thinking is only a small part of it. Can I use some automation processes, right? So actually I decided I'll show one example. So can you figure out what is wrong with this example? This fielder is catching the ball. Actually the ball is not landing in his hand, right? In his hands it's not landing. Can you see it? Yeah, so actually that was a very nice thing that happened. I used Gemini AI to generate this to illustrate the point that when a fielder wants to catch a ball, he knows the trajectory that it's parabolic and he doesn't actually calculate the equation y equal to ax square plus bx plus c. Go check the angle at which it was hit and the momentum with which it is going. He doesn't do all that. He just goes by the line of sight, taking cognitive aspects in mind, right? And just goes and lands there where the ball is, he predicts it, right? So that's happening through cognition, not through deliberate thinking. So as I thought I'll make this, then I also realized one more important thing, that this is actually an AI generated image, and AI is, in the age we are living in, is creating all sorts of illusions. It's actually creating an illusion that the ball is landing in that person's hand, and it gives me as one of the good response images, right? So we have to also become very aware that AI can do only the deliberate thinking and only can generate things and show us in a slightly illusory manner. This is another interesting example. Okay, I'm very thankful to my kid. He makes me learn about a lot of dinosaurs. Okay, you don't really have to know about dinosaurs. Just point hand, which of this dinosaur is a herbivore? Can you just point with your hand? So that's it, the one to your left, right? Is there any disagreement in that? I don't think so, right? If you have to do the same thing through an AI program, a deep learning program, this requires a million images, but you are just able to do just like that. That's the power of our cognition. And very interestingly, there are some children who cannot catch these cues. So it's not their fault, it's just that that small bit is missing. And if we can empathize with them in this sense that, okay, that so-called thing which we take for granted, I don't think any of you would have thought for once that other one could have been possibly a herbivore, right? But for some people, the cues really are not so apparent. And that, I think, is the most important thing in our journey of teaching. So very interestingly, the brain is an organ which we have been listening. It is repairable, rewirable, independent of age. So this is one interesting paper I have come across. It's a Nature paper which says that blind children, when they were put on this task of braille, so braille is something to do with the skin organ, and they were blind, it turned out that the areas which were getting fired were visual. So what we are thinking is actually only a small portion of our knowledge. So there is also a link between skin and eyes. And some of the children picked up for this experiment were born blind. This is a beautiful paper. You may want to note down the title of the paper, which is the title of this slide. So there is also a aspect of functional neuroplasticity. This you can actually try at home. Maybe it takes a month to try this. You can actually use your dominant hand, if say right hand. You can train a particular weight, try to lift heavy weights with your right hand. Even if your left hand is untrained, it shows some capacity. Many of us have experienced these kind of scenarios. That is an example of neuroplasticity in daily life. So neuroplasticity brings back us to action. So it tells us, do the work. That's exactly what is taught in Bhagavad Gita, that karma is very important, action is very important, yogaha karmasu kaushalam. So all these things we hear, but with the current AI technologies, we are so much outcome driven. I just want the output. So neuroplasticity is definitely bringing us the hope and getting us back to something more spiritual. So what is its relevance in, say, the current ChatGPT world? So in 1980s, there was a protest by teachers that calculator should not be used in classrooms. Now we all outgrew it. The reason is we started thinking of higher order questions. A calculation is nothing, it's a very small thing. It's the insight which is important. I think in the current AI world, we should be asking these fundamental questions. What is that as humans we can do much more than just take some pattern or some optimization? Can we bring in a purpose-driven approach? Not just strength-based, but a purpose-driven. It's something like a vector where you are measuring the strength by the magnitude and the direction is given by the purpose. Can we create such vectors in our classrooms? And also maybe enable AI tools as well as computer tools for enabling the students to learn better. So this is another very important aspect, that the opposite of surviving brain. So many of us heard this. So can anybody tell me opposite of surviving brain? It's actually the learning brain. It's very, again, very surprising. The antonym of survive is not learn, but for brain it is. So if you see a child like this in the classroom, know for sure that the student is not learning anything. First, our duty should be to bring him from the surviving part to the learning part and see how the child can actually see the point being made in the class. Of course, this also brings us to questions like, okay, so can we be too harsh on the child? Moment we are harsh on the child, they go into a surviving mode, not the learning mode. So it's the positive identity. Again, thanks to early speakers for speaking about this at greater length. So focusing on the positivities and strengths would enable the child to learn better. So I can skip these again safely without getting into details. One of the main thing we want to do is from Vidya Vahini side. So I also take pride in saying I'm a volunteer for Vidya Vahini for last 7 to 8 years, and I'm definitely very happy to get associated with them. Their passion is infectious. So they want to bring technology support to neurodivergent children. So we're working on some of those projects. So the story of this rabbit. So this rabbit is in a school in which it had two subjects. One is running and the other is swimming. And the rabbit loved running, but it was failing in swimming. The parents decided that it should get good grades in swimming. So they said, so no, you should stop running now and spend more time in swimming. Now the rabbit definitely is dejected, and it found suddenly its parents are not there, so it came for a run outside. So what happens in a working brain? So there are basically 3 modules. So many of us are covering. I picked up this from a education psychology book. So there is an environment aspect, a working memory aspect, and a long-term memory aspect. So many of the points covered would address some of these parts. So one of the main things we have to remember dealing with neurodiverse children is the environment aspect becomes extremely crucial. So if I just give a verbal instruction to a child, the child wouldn't have caught it. There would be definitely a lot of gap from what we speak to what actually they comprehend. I think the environment aspect needs a lot more attention. So in the strength-based learning, again, I picked this up from Professor Armstrong's book, Neurodiversity in the Classroom, a very beautiful book. And in that book, the author covers several aspects. I'm very happy to note that assistive technologies are also coming into picture. So there should be a good balance between should we give the smartphone or a tablet to the child, or should we make them sit in front of a computer, because we don't want to make them spend a lot of time, give them a lot of screen time. But some of these aspects are definitely tested now, and we should give a fine balance between them. Of course, environmental aspects, strength awareness, positive role models, everything comes into picture. Also, I don't have to cover this because some of the speakers have already touched upon this. So should we look at neurodiverse children as robotic, or as if their brain is growing like a forest? Or should we take the military metaphor or the harvest metaphor? In fact, I would strongly suggest all the participants to recall most of the words spoken by most of the experts. All experts, they were using terms like blossom, and they were actually showing pictures where the seed sapling is growing into a tree. Most of them are using harvest metaphor, not the military metaphor where you are saying fall in line, you're battling something. So when we do that, we end up getting into the survival mode, not the learning mode. I'll skip this. I'll skip some of this. So gamification again is a very nice area where a lot of things can be explored, thanks to some of the speakers for focusing on the combinatorial strategic kind of aspects for learning. Assistance in classroom, we can also look at AI based, large language model based. So there are existing apps. One of the speakers showed how the sentence was constructed. Maybe an app like this was used. Usually children with slightly differently abled characteristics can have rigidity in routine. So you need to have some apps for our purposes to maintain the routines. And of course, as I am saying, the balance should be maintained between assistive technologies and also taking the student away from technology, because we don't want the child to harm themselves also with more screen time, etc. So now let me quickly cover the apps we are doing at Sathya Vidya Vahini. So again, thanks to all the resource people, and it is quite educative experience. So we have some undergraduate students developing this. This is also a very important thing, because the next generation students are learning about the future problems. So we also see it is as win-win situation, where our undergraduate students get to learn about what is neurodiversity, what is a universal design principle. They get to see some of this, and they also look at this as seva. So story builder, you can actually see that the color choice, all this is again thanks to Vidya ma'am. They are also suggesting this. You can also see the mascots. So the teacher can upload the story in sentence form with some augmented images. So the story can be rendered like this with the ISL support. And we were also thinking, how do we integrate with the existing dictionaries some of these sentences? As the words are read out, the cursor moves and the words get highlighted, and the child also gets to experience, see the meaning. So some of the objectives we kept are uploading the story, ISL support, teacher can upload the stories currently. We are also looking at, can we give the child sentences in block form, where the student, the child should be able to manipulate and rearrange and reconstruct the story, or bring a logic into the story, so that the story builder is not just for the teacher to build, but also for the student. Then we also have this mouse driven app, we call it Dream Drop, where there is a ball and it has to be put in a target. So something like this. So we are also trying to maintain, track the parameters, so that we can understand motion deficiencies. So how much time the child has paused, or did they retract back, what was the trajectory taken, kind of things. So some errors such as overshooting or counterproductive moves. The child is supposed to go in one direction but went in another direction. Then the third app is this typing tutor. Again, we want to make it in a user-friendly manner, also getting into the neuroscience aspects such as left hand, right hand, and what will be the deviations between them. We want to maintain certain analytics. And you can also see the interface. We are trying to make it as attractive and user-friendly as possible. So this is how the interface looks. So you can also see both hands with coloring, all this. So thanks to Sanjay sir for going into all these details and explaining our children. So some word count, time, etc. We also maintain certain metrics. So again, students have actually come up with this. So when we are typing the keyboard, we would not know unless, so a particular character is expected, but the child types another character. So we don't actually perceive which finger was used. So we were discussing, and some of the students actually came up with this problem, the idea that if a particular character is typed instead of another character, we can actually do a logical grouping. If they are nearby, we can call them as a finger error. If it is totally a different hand, we will call it as logical error. So this way we can actually track certain analytics, and then see what kind of fundamental error the child made, or is it a very minor error that you just give a further instruction, mediate, and then the lesson is learned. So these kind of apps we are developing, and we are hoping that in maybe 3 to 4 months, we want to post it in the website. Yeah, thank you.
May I now humbly invite Sri Shankar PB and Sri Ajay Anvekar to present a token of appreciation to Dr. N. Uday Kiran. Thank you, sir.